In this lesson, we'll take a look at duplicated toolpaths to reuse parameters and selections. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to demonstrate how to duplicate a toolpath, identify the difference between derived and duplicated operations, and show how to rename an operation. Let's carry on with the file from our previous example, and let's talk about the differences between duplicating a toolpath and creating a derived toolpath. We want to focus our attention on toolpath Groove 1. This was the toolpath that was created to rough the 3 grooves on the larger OD of our part. What we want to do is we want to focus on the differences between duplicating this and deriving a new operation based on it. If we right-click and we edit the groove operation, let's take a look at some of our parameters. For example, the front stock is 2.1 inches offset, and the back is set to the model back at 0, which means that these are our containment planes for where we're looking for information to cut. We're also using rest machining. If we take a look at our radii values, these are all going to be our stock settings. In the passes section, finishing is turned off and roughing is turned on, as well as stock to leave. And in our linking parameters section, these are all default. This information is going to be useful if we wanted to create a new toolpath based on some of these parameters, such as stock to leave. So if we right-click on Groove, we can create a derived operation, turning, and we can select Turning Groove. When we look at the parameters in here, you can see that our geometry section is offset the same, and rest machining is selected. We can see in our passes section that we're not using any finishing passes, but roughing and stock to leave are turned on. And all of our defaults for the rest of the operation settings are the same. So if we wanted to reuse those settings, for example, if our stock to leave was not a default value, we could create that derived operation to save us time from re-entering those values and potentially making a change or an error. However, if we simply want to reutilize this toolpath to produce an individual finishing toolpath with maybe a different tool, then we can right-click on it and we can select Duplicate. There's also a shortcut key for this, which is Control D. Notice currently that this is using Tool 8. However, we're going to right-click and we're going to edit and change and select a new tool. When we're looking inside of our document, we have OD grooving tool number 1, and we have an OD grooving tool number 8. These parameters will allow us to select the tool that we want to use for roughing and finishing. So right now for our finishing operation, I'm going to continue to use the OD grooving tool number 8, but I might go back and change the tool that's used for roughing. Also, we want to take a look at some of our parameters. While we still want to focus on the same area and use rest machining, we now want to focus our attention on finishing passes rather than roughing, and we don't want to leave any stock. So by just changing these settings, we can quickly create a new toolpath that can be used to finish these areas. Note that some of the other toolpaths are failing, mainly because these are used for rest machining. So what we want to do is we want to regenerate these toolpaths by using Control G. Now we were able to quickly and easily copy this toolpath. If we wanted to make changes to Groove 1, we can go back and we can edit the tool that it's using. For example, if we wanted to use tool number 1, we could use that for our roughing operations. We can select Setup 3 and then use Control G to regenerate. Notice that this one is producing a warning. It's telling me that it was completed successfully, but it's empty. And this is because this tool is too large to fit. So this tells me that I need to go back in and I can only use tool number 8 because this is the tool that's going to fit into those grooves. Again, you'll notice that all the changes affect downstream toolpaths, so we'll need to regenerate. Once we regenerate all the toolpaths, we now have all the separate operations that can be used to both rough and finish this area. But what happens if we want to also finish off the groove on the smaller ID? Well, if we go in and we modify our parameters for our geometry, we can move this front plane to include that information. If we regenerate the toolpath, you'll notice if we view this from the top that we're now going in and we're cutting this groove as well as these 3, but the tool is also focusing in on other areas of the design. So you'll notice that it's coming in and it's clearing out a little bit of information in this area, mainly because the tool that was used was not able to get a square cut in this corner. We need to be careful with exactly what we use each tool for. Side loading a grooving tool is not going to be good because it's going to put too much stress on the tool and will likely cause a breakage. So ideally, we would not want to include all of these grooves because we're going to have an issue with loading the tool. While we could modify the parameters, it's also easy for us to come in and simply duplicate that toolpath again and make adjustments to the new toolpath. This time we can go into geometry and we can move both the front and back planes. This way we can focus our attention just on that groove and allow it to generate a finishing toolpath just in that area. I'm going to select the setup and again Control G to generate all my toolpaths, and then I want to rename some of these toolpaths. Groove 1 is now going to be Groove Rough. The second copy of Groove is now going to be Groove Finish Large OD. And then my third instance is going to be Groove Finish Small OD. So now we have operations to focus our attention on each of these areas. We can rough them all at the same time. We can come back and finish the large OD as well as the small OD. And again, remember that there are multiple parameters in here that we can modify and change. If we want to change the way that it's cutting, either front to back or back to front, if we want to modify where it's focusing its attention, if we want to focus in on our passes, or if we want to allow it to do some roughing passes or additional step overs for our finishing pass. We can also decide what we want the direction to be. Right now it's set to up and down, but we can also have it cut up only or down only. So we're going to leave all these settings as we have them now, but keep in mind that there are multiple parameters for each of these toolpaths, and it's a good idea for you to explore them and figure out what they do on your own, because some of them will change based on the geometry selected, the area we're machining, and even the tool that we're using. Once you've made these changes, let's go ahead and save the file before moving on to the next step.